Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to this episode of the New Story podcast with me, your host, Rebecca Conran. I'm a life coach, energy healer, and astrologer. And on this podcast, we talk about lots of spiritual themes, a lot of astrology. And today we're talking about rewiring the mind, which is something very much in alignment with some of the cosmic shifts we've been going through with Uranus now entered into Gemini and will be there till 2033. And today I've got Shauna Cummins with me, someone who I have been able to kind of circle around for the last decade or so. We have a lot of friends in common, and both, you know, she's still a practitioner in New York City. I used to be there. She's a hypnotist, an author, and an educator who's still based in New York City. And her work is dedicated to sharing hypnosis as the medicine of the imagination and one of the oldest, easiest, and most misunderstood ways to create positive change for yourself. And I'm so happy to have you here today to talk about these themes of kind of rewriting the inner dialogue. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the power of our inner dialogue in our manifestation process. We hear about manifestation ad nauseum, it seems like nowadays. But a lot of times, like people get frustrated by the process because it is about rewriting how we talk to ourselves first and foremost, and that inner belief system that we carry, and that's really the nuance that helps us shift being able to live our desires to feeling stuck or stagnant or like we're a bad manifester. So we're going to talk about that and how to develop discernment with our mental messages and dialogue. And then Shauna's going to offer us some practical tools to shift that inner dialogue uh, with hypnosis in mind. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Uranus for the listeners and recently entering Gemini. And thanks for bearing with me, Shauna, while I
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited to hear all about it.
while I talk about this. And also, we're recording on a full moon, so like if we are a little bit slower, if I'm a bit slower today, it's because of that. No, but Uranus recently entered Gemini. Did you feel a shift in that? It was about a week ago, and it was like everything was so sloggy and heavy, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden it was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like
It's
pure,
so real. So
yeah.
real. I'm like, yeah,
And the
it's
mind, it
amazing.
just felt like there was a lot more opportunity and potential. And it's like, oh,
Yes.
I can be actually maybe curious about these thoughts in a way that I felt really stuck before.
Oh, yeah. I almost bought like 3 tickets to Europe. I almost like finished my book. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I had to rein it in and, get it organized. But yeah, I
Like
felt it.
change, change.
I was like, yes, let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that is Gemini, isn't it? Because it's very much like all the ideas come in at once. It's not just like one new idea, you're having 10 new ideas. And it's a really, I think it brings in a lot of like fun, light energy to change to the idea of change and awakening, which is what Uranus stands for. But this placement, I mean, it's fundamentally about disruption and innovation, especially now in the realm of the mind, our communication, and our perception. Gemini rules thinking patterns, language, and constant mental chatter. And, as I mentioned, I've been mentioning this all year to my listeners, but discernment is really a key word, I think, this year of being able to see the fact from the fiction, the reality from the illusion. And a lot of that's coming in with the grand Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries. But, Uranus is associated with breakthroughs and sudden insights. And people don't realize how intuitive actually Uranus is, how it expands our psychic capabilities, our inner knowing. And it's really here to shake up any habitual thought patterns and push us to question narratives that we hold, if it's really something that we feel is true to us, if it's a conditioned belief. But this energy is also scattered and reactive, and it needs harnessing. Like we need to have some sort of discipline around it because the other side of the coin is like the doom scrolling and the bed rotting on TV and all of that kind of stuff that happens. So it is important to, like, even if it's just a simple couple of minutes a day, have a practice where you're like, I'm here to become the master of my mind, and to not let my mind master me all the time. And why I really wanted to have Shauna on in this regard too is because hypnosis fits so well with Uranus and Gemini. Because Gemini, it's like bridging the conscious and the unconscious and the subconscious mind and the unconscious through our language. And so I got a loud plane ahead. Since Uranus is governing the nervous system and rapid repatterning, hypnosis is like a perfect tool to use to help maybe make that process a little bit gentler or more intentional in our practice. So the invitation of Uranus and Gemini, and it's really coming in heavy and hot this May, is this energy, this Uranus energy, is to question your thoughts, to become more discerning about your inner dialogue, to be conscious about rewriting mental patterns, and to use tools like hypnosis to harness the process. And of course, if you feel, like you need to be shown how to use it, Sean is somebody who you can work with also one-on-one and develop a practice, so you don't feel like maybe you're having to do it all on your own too. So that's the astrology of the moment. Shauna, tell me a little bit about your process of why you were so drawn to hypnosis and how you came to be a hypnotist.
Well, I'm having my, is it 14th, it's my 14th anniversary of being a hypnotist this year, which is
Wow,
very
congrats.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
in April, actually. Yeah. So it's been a long time now, but it is one of those things where it feels like time collapsing, where I'm like, what? How did that happen? But when I found it, I had already been in through a lot of therapy since I was like at the school counselors, like skipping class when I was like 12, throughout my teenage years and 20s. And I was doing a lot of depth psychology as well. That was very helpful. And then I studied a little bit of interpersonal psychology and counseling and things like that. But all that is to say, despite all of that therapy, I still needed a lot of help. And I found myself in a place where I was just really out of alignment, with work, with like relationships, with addictions. And I was seeking all sorts of healing, like lots of like yoga, meditation, shamanism, crystals, all the things, energy healing. And that was all very helpful. And I think it probably led me to the point where I found hypnosis. And then that was amazing. It went so deep so quickly. And it was like all the roads, kind of like connected in that moment, were leading to that moment. And for me, it was just the healing of shame in my relationship with myself, which is very apropos for what we're talking about today. Because all the other things helped me increase awareness, like educate myself, recognize patterns. But I still had this abominable relationship with myself and how I spoke to myself on an unconscious level. And I, without like, even doing affirmations and, doing self-love practice, but there was still this thing that in hypnosis, which is kind of a relaxed state, feels like meditation, but its purpose is different. So in that state of hypnosis, you have a heightened sense of suggestibility when you're in that relaxed trance state. And the suggestions just went in like an elixir, going to exactly where I needed it most. And it just started to align everything. It was like a domino effect where I was like, oh my God, okay, we can do this now, and it was very, in a way, it's subtle and profound at the same time. Because you're like, yeah, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. Yeah, of course I'm going to, stop drinking. Of course I'm going to do these. It's all just like easy, but also It was making the unconscious conscious, and just kind of, it was like a slipstream in a river. Then it started to go fast. And at that time, I was also trying to leave my kind of career at the time, which is hard to say it's even a career, but I was like working for this fashion designer for years, and it was not great. And then publishing a magazine with some friends, which was super fun, but very draining. And so I was thinking about going back to school and becoming a psychologist or a social worker at the time. And then I found hypnosis, and I was like, this is it. So I just studied and trained, and it went really well, really quickly. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, this is it. I
Yeah.
planned to do this, and so that was it. And then I've really, it's my life's work. There's no doubt about it. And now that I've been doing it for so long, I've, been adding things to it. Like I created a school of hypnosis, the Divine Feminine School of Hypnosis. I wrote a book called The Wishcraft, which is about self-hypnosis rituals, which I think is very beautiful and important, to share hypnosis in kind of a different way, so it's less like cognitive, and more spiritual in a way, a little bit more sacred. And then, yeah, I'm doing like all kinds of things with it.
Yeah, it's such a shame how like historically society has presented hypnosis too, because it's presented it as something really hokey and
Yeah,
silly, really, and it's actually just this really gentle and loving way to rework your communication. And that
exactly.
is something that we all need. We all need that for every avenue of our lives to create this more loving communication. So I think it's such a wonderful tool. And, as you were talking, just thinking about the listeners. And I think that, I don't know what you feel about this, Shauna, but it's such a life lesson to actually uncover all of the different ways that we've been conditioned or that
Mm,
the thoughts that hide underneath. And you just don't know until something lights up inside you and you know. So like you can be doing lots of different healing modalities and be getting care out of it and some results and to still not feel like you've really sort of made the shift you want to feel. And I think that's just so normal, that like
hmm
people should remember that it really is like a lifelong process and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like it's not you're not in any way failing at anything if you maybe don't get the nuance of what it is you're trying to learn yet, and to just like really stick with the process. Um, let's talk a little bit about the power of inner dialogue in our manifestation process. And by manifestation process, what I mean is how we create our lives, basically. I don't really mean like um, you know, I want $1 million, so how do I rewire my brain to get that? It's like, everything that we do in life comes from a mental intention. And sometimes even like we're looking for a partner or we're looking for a home or there are many things we're trying to put the pieces together in our life that we're trying to manifest. They don't have to be, could be health, could be, clear thinking. And so it's about the fact that we are intending everything with our thoughts and our feelings all the time. And so it's really about becoming the person in charge of that process and not just letting our subconscious run the show. But what's your thoughts on sort of the creative process with our inner dialogue?
I love the way you speak about it as a creative process, because I truly feel like, we are all artists of our own lives in that regard. And the basic premise is the power of the imagination to influence ourselves positively, negatively. When we imagine something in our mind deeply, when we feel it, when we sense it, it influences us. And so that can go many different ways. Like when we have fears and phobias, we go right into the story. We're feeling it. Our palms are sweating, our heart is racing because we're imagining it happening. That part of the brain doesn't know the difference. It actually is experiencing it as if the plane is crashing, like you're like, so that's an example of how it's unconsciously happening all the time in the negative. But when you consciously do it for what you want, or for healing, or for having a better relationship with yourself, or for, yeah, like clearly bringing in more of what you want into your life, it does the same. It activates serotonin, dopamine, it calms your system, and then you can start to work with it as a tool instead of just a default mode. And so, it's something that we do all the time, and it is really powerful. So in those like imagination mind movies that happen, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, it really, you have some power there. And so it's understanding that of course we all have fears and phobias. That you're not gonna, that's not just gonna go away, but you can increase the positive and you become more conscious with it and curious about it. And then now we know about neuroplasticity. So that really empowers this as a very practical tool, which is the tagline for it is the neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that the more you practice certain thought patterns and ideas and beliefs, the stronger they become.
Mm.
So when you're consciously practicing, like, okay, you got this, you can do this, like, whether it be affirmations or just beliefs, then your mind is more likely to go there. For me, what's really important is to work with it very intentionally and in a somatic, embodied way. So you influence yourself on a deeper level.
Mm.
Otherwise, it can be kind of superficial, if you're saying things you don't believe, things like that. So it's really the power of the imagination to influence your reality, and also our ability to change our brains and to work with our attention to create new beliefs, thought patterns, behaviors, make them stronger.
Yes. I love that reminder too, that that part of the brain where we are, we're visualizing our fears and sometimes recreating those situations. It doesn't know the difference. So it's like we're making that a reality if it's what we're focused on. And I just think that's such a powerful reminder that, yeah, like you might go, oh, it's such a big idea for me to imagine something incredible for myself. But it's like, well, what's the difference with imagining something horrible for yourself? And like, what's the point of allowing ourselves to kind of rewrite that? At least we could keep it an open-ended potential, as
Exactly.
yeah, as opposed to hold ourselves in like terror, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because there's an addictive quality to that. And the beautiful thing about this is it's all very liberating, because we have the statistic is we have 70,000 plus thoughts every day. That's old, a little old. It's before all the social media and everything that we're doing now. So I think for sure probably we have more, but that's already a lot, 70,000 plus. And those thoughts don't necessarily matter unless we make them matter with our attention and our intention.
Yeah.
And then it becomes our sensory influence imagination state. So once you start to realize, you become aware of the triggers and the negative spirals, they start to mean less. And then when you start to consciously practice the positive, it starts to mean more,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you are not only in control of create, you're creating it, but influencing yourself, but also what you believe
Yes.
to be
Yeah.
true.
And I think also like you'd mentioned, that it's hard that you really need to embody the imagination and your, a new thought process in order to make it a reality. And that sometimes that can feel like, well, I don't believe what I'm saying. And I think like there is this really lovely opportunity there for questioning oneself, and that's such a really underrated quality actually for us humans is to question, well, why do I think like that? Well, what is under that? And to kind of dispel some of that energy by being curious about what is underneath. Why don't I believe that? What do I believe? Why do I believe that instead? And just having that sort of dialogue with yourself and being able to develop that dialogue, I think will also get you to a place where you can more fully embody your what your desires. But what are your tips for kind of developing discernment with mental messages and, yeah, more fully embodying our beliefs and sort of connecting the dots?
I am a big fan of what I call self collaboration, um, which is the practice of becoming intimate with yourself and your thoughts and looking for things that you can appreciate about yourself in your life and then receiving it on a deep level as if you were your own best friend. So you start to collaborate with yourself and your thoughts. And I love that because it's a little bit more open ended in the sense that, oh, yeah, like I was really hard on myself there. Like, oh, I was really upset about that. I noticed that. But you know what? This was good. I appreciate that you showed up here. Let's do this. Let's work together, because it is kind of like a multiplicity of different parts working together. So a very simple practice that I like am evangelical about with my clients, and because it really helped me the most, and I see it as a foundational, simple practice, is at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, this is the state where you're about to slip off to sleep, the hypnagogic state or the hypnagogic. People say it a different way, but I always say hypnagogic state. Um, you're more receptive, just like when you go into trance, because your conscious mind is slipping away into the sleep state. So in that state, do a little memory training exercise, which is like review your day and then just pick three moments that you can review and thank yourself for. And like repeat your name as you thank yourself for, because then it signals to the brain that, like, oh, we're in this together. You matter. You're my best friend. We can do this. That was nice. Thank you. And new things every day because it sparks novelty. So your brain will look and find it. And that's the beautiful thing too about it is you realize, yes, we have all these thoughts every day. That's kind of overwhelming, but your brain does follow your instruction on some level. There's an old saying, the mind is a wonderful tool, but a terrible master. And like, it's all about working with it as a tool and not letting it just being like. So when you do that, let's say you do it, like I try to do it as much as possible. But in the beginning, I would definitely do it, for stretches of time. And I noticed, like, very ambiently in other areas of my life, just going about my day, my brain was much more likely to be like, oh, yeah, that really sucked, but you have your own back. It's going to be okay. Because it activates a part of the brain called which is often referenced in manifestation practice, called the RAS for short, or the reticular activating system. And it's the part that is constantly scanning for like what's important and tracking it. So just by simply looking for new things, your brain is like forced to work a little harder. So it's also about you and your relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits of the practice of gratitude and how important that is for manifestation, which it is. But oftentimes it's outside of ourselves and our relationship with ourselves. And so this really changes your perception of yourself, and
Mhm.
it trains your brain to look for evidence that supports, yes, you can do this, small and big ways that you can do this.
Yeah.
So that's a really powerful one that I feel like is foundational.
I think that's an awesome tool. And also for people, it doesn't have to be some really glamorous thing that you think of either. It can be, you can think of it in terms of an appreciation or, I
Yeah,
didn't give up on this thing today and I worked really hard or um,
exactly.
it doesn't have to be, I'm so in love and I'm so grateful.
Yeah,
You can start with just the things that you also, because sometimes you're not going to be feeling that way and or that doesn't feel real to do, but there's always something that you can appreciate about
every day.
yourself and
Yeah.
be a cheerleader. I'm curious too, like what's your feeling, the way that social media works today is that it basically, there are billionaires that are profiting off of us reprogramming our minds to have a heightened sense of fear. And literally, how they set up our algorithms is so we have an emotional reaction, and then there's something we can buy afterward. And it is like literally like this process of programming. Like, what's your feeling of like walking through this technological age that wants to program us one way, and how to sort of, I don't know, defend against that? I don't want to, I don't think we need to be defensive. I think we can be empowered about it. But yeah, what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, that's huge for me. I think about it a lot in terms of, the practice of trance and suggestibility. And I often reference it with clients, like when people are like, "Oh, I can't be hypnotized," or like, "I'm not into hypnosis." I'm like, "Well, how many hours do you spend on your phone today looking at social media?" Because that is a state of hypnosis. It's a narrow state of focus and attention where you become more easily influenced, and that's why there are influencers, like, and it's emotional. That's why there's so much video and emotional content and rage and anger and the things like that that allow you, your emotional mind is more receptive to suggestion. So it is like designed like a gambling slot machine, right? So it's reward deprivation, and it's very draining, it's very training. So like it really entrains our brain, which is another word for trance. And I feel like hopefully there'll be like a revolution in a way of how we can organize and put it in its place. But in the hypnosis world, it's often thought of as like our generation smoking, like it's going to have detrimental effects, and it already has. And to be honest with you, I'm not in a good place with it myself. And so I think about it right now all the time, but little moves like just taking my phone out of my bedroom at night has been very helpful. And for me, I'm very much, I have to work very creatively as an ADHD kind of person. Like I can't just be like, you know, whatever optimizing, maxing habit way. It has to be very creative and organic in order for things to flow. So I try to find ways that are really in alignment, and it makes a big difference. Like I think I want to, next step is like really putting it out of my work zone for hours at a time, you know? Um,
Well, I think it's like incredible that you just owned up to it as well, because I think most people would agree, they feel the same way. But I think also for our generation, in the work that we do, there is a lot of pressure to be online and to be sharing online. And
mm,
I mean, there are a lot of amazing practitioners that no one knows about because they're not on.
yes,
And they're probably
yes.
even better practitioners because of it. And there are lots of practitioners that are probably pretty good that have, that aren't as good as someone who's not online, that have millions and millions of followers that spend lots of time on the marketing side, the social media side. And it's difficult. It's difficult when you run your own business and you are like, well, I can't live in a vacuum because
Exactly.
I'll know
Yeah.
about me, but also I need to safeguard my well-being. So I think that's just like such a big thing for us, in sharing and learning what our limits are as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like I'm right there with you because I'm like not totally offline, but also I like to protect my energy from the online space. And yet when I first started hypnosis, I was one of the only people or the first people to hashtag
Yeah.
such a such a ridiculous thing, hashtag hypnosis in like a therapeutic way, because
Yeah.
it was only hypnosis as far as like old, spirals and quirky kind of like imagery around like, hypnosis in a weird
Yes. The
Hollywood way.
eyes like that.
Yeah, like that. It was like weird associations. And then it just blew up, from then. And then, but what I really, so I'm really glad that I have that analog digital relationship to my work and also the way that I socialize and think and everything. But I have noticed, social media as also being like a real social engineering like way of relating to each other in a way that I think is just horrible. Like I really, as a practitioner, I think it's just really horrible. I think it brings out the worst in
Yeah.
people in a lot of ways, although it does an amazing amount of good as well. And I know it's empowering as far as democratizing who can make money, all the things. That's wonderful. That hasn't been the case with me, but maybe even had, I would have a different, I wouldn't be so salty about it. But still, it's the opposite of the work that I do. Like with the school, the Divine Feminine School of Hypnosis, like it is about really grounding hypnosis in the power of compassion and community and, you know, connecting to people that are different than us and clearing our judgments and like opening up, like all of that. And the social media does the opposite. And when you're a practitioner, you're forced to do the opposite as well, which is very informed by the algorithm, you know. And it for in me, it inspires like a kind of feeling bad and competitiveness that when I'm in community with people in real life or even in my own practices on world in Zoom, it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
That this practice and my practice does the opposite of that in a very genuine healing way.
Yeah.
So it's like we have a lot of work to do there in order to like improve it. And
Yeah,
you
and
know.
I think that does come back to the Uranus and Gemini kind of energy too, because it is about like reworking systems. And so right now we have this system of networking that's very impersonal and it's really removing us from one another. And one of the reasons why I've brought back, because I back in the day, I've been doing this podcast for 10 years, and back in the day I did a lot of interviews and stuff like that, and then I just made it an astrology podcast, but for me, like I want to connect with community and then, but I want to like set it and forget it. Do you know what I mean? I want to like,
Mm,
I love that it lives somewhere people can interact with it, but it's not like I need to be interacting with it as it's being interacted with, but it's this leading us back to learning new ways of networking and restructuring that away from probably this really impersonal um, and frankly, just grotesquely aesthetic based way of interacting with one another, and
yeah.
actually bringing us back into kind of like some sort of reform where we figure out a better way to have community, to have network with other practitioners. I loved working at a wellness center, and it's such a special thing when you can sort of bounce
Hmm.
ideas off of different practitioners. You can always like learn something new and practice something new. So yeah, I hope that, we've got Uranus and Gemini till 2033. So maybe
Mm,
that's something we can all set our focus to, is that our ability to actually connect and those systems of connection and communication move away from this very impersonal way and more into, something that like makes you feel something. I went to this women's drum circle in the woods the other day, and this amazing practitioner, she's going to be on as well. And pretty much everybody was over the age of 40, probably up to the age of maybe 75, all these women. And it was just fantastic. And I didn't know anybody there. And I just was like, these are my sisters. Like, we were just drumming in these woods. Like, it was an incredible experience. And the communication that came through it and the empowerment that everybody felt without actually saying anything, with just like sharing space and sharing a rhythm and an energy and an intention. And I'm hoping that that's like where we move towards.
I know, I hear you. That's really beautiful. Yeah, and hopefully do tools and innovations will come from that. And I think some of the young kids are moving towards it with all this like nostalgia for the 90s and different things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah, their
Mm.
version, their version.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us a little bit before we go about the offerings that you have coming up and how people can find you and yeah.
Yes, sure. Well, my school year is ending soon, so I have a lot more openings for one-on-one sessions or long-term work together. So if you're interested in doing like, wishcraft, hypnosis, mentorship, or just one-on-one work, I really am very excited about doing that right now. Here in person in NYC, I have a space called the Hypnotist Loft NYC with my partner, Stephen, who's a filmmaker and photographer, and we do events. We have a hypnosis sound sanctuary event where he does ambient music, and our friend Boschko, who's a sound healer, does like individual sound healing, and then I do a hypnosis journey. We're having a really big one that we're excited about for the summer solstice on I think it's the 20th or the 21st, whatever that Saturday is. And then
in June.
open to travel. Yeah, I'm open to travel if anyone wants me to come anywhere. But I'm finishing my second book that should be released hopefully in August, which is like an inspiring book of wishes and wishing in a ritual, kind of like small ritual way, and a way that you can actually interact with the book and make your own wishes and work with it. So you can stay tuned for that. And otherwise, I'm very happy just to connect with people. And then, of course, there's the school if anyone wants to train. I don't take that many people, but it's very, if it's a calling, I think sometimes the stars align. And yeah, definitely reach out. Feel free.
That's incredible. There's lots of opportunities there to work with Shauna. Shauna, thank you so much for having um for coming on, for having me on my show. So, and one takeaway that I'm just thinking of to leave the listener with is just that if there's one thing that you could do that Shauna reminded us of is to like let go of the social media at night when you're in that impressionable state and actually exchange it for some like solid self-love work where you guide yourself to look at your day, appreciate the things that you did well or that you just tried your best at, and just start to really help the brain to create new synapses around the potential that you have and around your imagination in a positive way instead of giving lots of headspace to either people profiting off of it or our fears and making those fears into reality in our imagination. So thank you so much for sharing all that, Shauna. And you can connect with Shauna through her website, and all her details will be in the show notes as well as mine. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much. This is wonderful. Thank you.